This is the Roller Coaster Podcast, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Life is a wild ride. It has twists and turns. It's scary, exciting, and downright fun. So throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
Okay, before we get started, check out nectargrowth.com. nectargrowth.com. It's free to join, but not for long. Nectar is an extension of the roller coaster. It's where you can start your own journey of self-exploration and growth. In Nectar, you'll find different topics of interest, daily blogs, affirmations, journal prompts, and you can connect with some of the fantastic coaches that have been on the roller coaster. Soon, we'll be adding videos, meditations, live discussions, and events. Our signature course is a journey of self-improvement, and it's valued at $397. But once you join, it's available to you at no cost. So if you're feeling stuck, if you feel like you need to change and not sure where to start with Nectar Growth Network. Come join us. You know you're worth it. Now, let's get on with today's show. Are you alive, or are you just merely living life on repeat? It's a question that I never thought to ask myself until my mid-40s. I know it seems a bit shocking, but it's true. It's easy to get stuck in the routine of everyday life because, let's face it, we all have bills to pay and people to take care of. But is it possible to approach every day like it was an adventure? Joining me today is Kellie Okonek, who's biked, kited, skied, hiked, and adventured through 29 countries, and she's a bush pilot in Alaska. Well, Kellie knows a few things about adventure, and she's here to chat about how we can approach our lives the same way. Hi, Kellie.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Wow. That's a lot of adventure that you've got packed into your life. How did you get started in all of this? Like, where did the story begin?
Right? Well, that's a funny question. Where did the story begin? Because I don't know that it ever began, or does adventure ever have a beginning and ending is my existential question for today, I suppose. But I think, I grew up in Northwest Washington and was presented with outdoor adventures as a child. And then, my parents split and I stayed with my mom, and she went to California, and it was kind of taken away from my life in my adolescence. And there was something about coming back or becoming an adult as I went to college and then graduated and started asking myself, what I want to do with my time and how, who am I? All of those questions. And it was like I went back full throttle to like almost make up for lost time. And I had this fire in me. I've always had this, ever since being an adult. I've always had this fire in me. And now I understand it's just my curiosity, passion, and purpose. And all of my adventures have been a function of following that inner knowing and that inner fire and letting it burn brightly in the world rather than cause mayhem inside my belly, if you will.
That inner knowing, are you referring to knowing what your purpose is?
Yeah, I would say inner knowing or that inner curiosity. Like, I'm not sure. I am more connected to my purpose now than I ever was before. But when I use inner knowing in this context, I even mean that inner thing pulling on my heartstrings, that thing that said ski, that thing that said fly, that thing that said, tell your first job you can't come for 10 months so you could go to Mount Baker and teach ski lessons and go in the backcountry for the first time, and then go to Argentina by yourself that summer because you were going to be one of those people who skied in South America. And, so I did.
Yeah, it sounds like you, at an early age, dropped that fear that holds so many of us back, and you embraced the courage to just try these things.
My greater fear was not living. So it's which fear is going to be in control. I was more afraid of wasting my life and not living out my dreams and not doing the things that I felt compelled to than I was of going to South America by myself, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, it goes back to, when do we choose to change? Well, when the comfort or when the pain of where we are becomes too much, well, then we decide to change. So, I can see how for you it was just the fear of this versus the fear of this. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, a few years ago, I listed all of my fears as part of a personal development coaching program I was doing. And it was interesting because all of my fears were fears of things I wouldn't do, which you would look at me and be like, oh, you must be afraid of dying. And I don't know, it could always happen. There's 1,000 good ways to die every day. But my greater fear is now and always has been not living and not living my fullest, truest potential and somehow holding back of what I have to offer the world and how I might change it and make it better and what I might do to expand freedom for myself and others. And I wouldn't say that it's that fear that drives me because over time I've developed a much stronger relationship with fear. And I would say that we're better friends than that now. So I don't do it out of fear. I do it out of love. And I'll be honest about where that fear exists, where it's still alive. But I feel like one of my favorite quotes is, I might get it wrong, but what will you do with this one wild and precious life? And that's the curiosity, right? What can we all do with this one wild and precious life? What might be possible, and living out of that curiosity is a lot of what drives me.
But it's those questions that we don't ask ourselves. And for me, it's not even that I didn't ask myself. I didn't even think I could ask myself, which it sounds completely stupid. But I was literally I was 44 when I started to figure some of this shit out.
Mm-hmm.
I
And as
joke, I was a slow learner.
here's the thing. I mean, like, some estimates now are that we're going to be living well into our hundreds, and there's this concept that within maybe 10 years or so, it might be that for every year we're alive, that our lifespan will grow by another year. And I mean, what a time to be alive. And then because of that, and when I was younger and my grandparents were 70, that was old. If they were still alive, even. And my parents now are 70, and I'm like, you guys seem 50. I mean, they're not even slowed down. And I'm like, and we see it happening in front of us. So with our lifespan, and then more importantly, if we do it right, our health span, expanding every day, it's never too late from my perspective to say, it was supposed to feel better than this. I could ask myself these questions, like, what is out there? What have I not noticed before in me, out of me, in the world? These are questions that like can completely wake us up. And in some respects we can ask every day, like, how could I've lived in Alaska 15 years, and last summer I chose to go back to the basics and to see Alaska with a beginner's mind again, before it was bigger, better, faster, stronger, before there had to be airplanes and expeditions and bigger mountains and longer trails and things that have never been done. And I said, I'm just going to give myself a passion project to write a mountain biking guide to Alaska, because I love mountain biking. And I saw all these people saying, like, where do you ride outside of Anchorage? And I'm like, dude, there's an entire state here. And then I got to thinking too, like every mountain biker should come to Alaska because we have great trails and it's such an amazing way to see the state. But it was so fun because I went back. If I was going to write a guide, I had to go, or I felt compelled to go ride everything and refamiliarize myself with it and experience it through, that mindset. And so as a result, I went back to all the things I might not have even done for 10 years. And so it's like even rediscovering what I thought I knew with a different lens, brought it up in such a different color. So it's like, the amazing and the adventurous doesn't even have to be challenging, risky, anything, right? It might just be right there, and it just might be the way we're looking at it.
And I think that's it, is that I think we've forgotten to approach life with that playful curiosity.
I think culturally, that is probably true. And, you know, I am observing a lot of cultural changes post pandemic. And depending on where people are, it may or may not feel post pandemic. Here in Alaska, we've got plenty of vaccines, and it does certainly feel like it's not a COVID world anymore. But whether we're post or in the middle of it, I think, we collectively have had a jolt to our system. And, as you say, it's when the pain of not doing is greater than the pain of doing that action comes, right? And so maybe it's people having more time. Maybe it's people realizing, like, at any point we could have some apocalyptic thing that changed everything forever, because we kind of just did, in a sense. Um, and it's like there's this collective awakening, right? So I think it's going to be interesting to see if maybe culturally we unforget to ask ourselves these important questions. I don't know. What are you seeing about time now and this sort of
I don't
phenomenon?
know. I don't know if this has to do with COVID or not, but we have two adult sons. They're 19 and 22. And they live in a different province, and they came here for the summer. One just left, and he actually lived with us for the past 10 weeks. So a lot of his friends, we're in Nova Scotia where they grew up. So he had a lot of his friends coming around. And he left a very rural community. He did high school in Ottawa, which is a major city, and then came back to this rural community after a year of college. Um, and a lot of his friends were coming around, and they know the things I talk about, and they were gravitating towards me. This one night he was having a party, and this discussion began around purpose. And the amount of kids, they're not kids, they're adults, young adults, that literally said to me, I don't understand the point of this all. I don't understand why I'm here. This is all meaningless. It has no purpose. And it was heartbreaking and shocking to hear, because you have to question, where did we go so wrong that these kids, our future, don't even know why they're here. They have no reason. Some of them have attempted suicide. Like, where are we going wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have children myself, so I hardly want to um, show up as some expert on a different generation. And I believe there's an element of mainstream culture and this idea of what should feel good or what you should want and who you should be causing a misguided direction of our energies, right? So there's two types of motivation: intrinsic motivation, curiosity, passion, purpose, autonomy, and mastery; and extrinsic motivation, all of the shoulds, um, money, fame, status, likability, social validation, everything out there that, I should feel happy when I drink Coca-Cola. Look, the ad says this, but then I don't. So it feels empty. And then it feels like, where's the substance, right? And so for me, that's a manifestation of this cultural rhetoric that we should be something or should like something, versus a cultural rhetoric that says, what do you like? When and how do you feel good? Is it the bustle of a city that makes you feel alive with the buzzing energy? Or is it standing on a windswept um, ridge overlooking the ocean and seeing the expansivity and feeling how small you are in the context of this nature? Um, and there's, I think there's some element too where in past societies, religion, gave so much with regard to purpose. And it presented a story of why and how you fit in. And in a more secular culture such as ours, granted religion still plays certain roles, but there's a lot of our culture that is not religious. And so where's the cultural story that fills that in and tells people that answer? And I think the truth is that there isn't one. And so people are left to find that answer. And if they're not equipped with the tools of how to do it, then they're probably feeling that disconnect and emptiness. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what I see in that situation.
that makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the things that you do is that you work with people to help explore putting adventure in their lives, right?
Yeah, and I think, what I'll say about adventure is like the greatest adventure that's ever happened for me is the one between my two ears. Because, it might look adventurous to fly an airplane, around the backcountry of Alaska, or to climb, the tallest mountains in the world and ski back down them. Like, and let me tell you, those are absolutely adventurous. But my goodness, I always say if you can make friends with the voices in your head at 20,000 feet with 5,000 feet of exposure below you as you're still going up and you're exhausted and you're scared and everything else, like you can make friends with the voices in your head doing just about anything. And so I study a lot of flow science, and flow is a state of consciousness when we feel our best and perform our best. And the cool thing about flow is that it's achievable or accessible to everybody. And there are certain activities we all have kind of a primary flow where we get into this proverbial zone the best. Mine's mountain biking, skiing, flying, things of this nature. Other people, it might be drawing, writing, running. It might be skiing too, just not off of the highest peaks in the world, because we all are where we are. And so there's a saying that biology scales, personality doesn't. So the work I do isn't about helping people, go become a certain type of adventurer, but rather to take the principles of adventure, intrinsic motivation, authentic living, connection to your inner fire, and to your own personal gifts, and then creation of a life wherein you put those out to the world, right? And you live that fire, which could otherwise be known as your purpose, and are connected to that joy, fulfillment, flow, and your own, manifestation of what would be possible if. What would happen if, like that's what I want to know.
And I think that's the problem is that people, when you ask what's possible if or what's possible when, that's also challenging somebody to step out of that prescribed zone that society expects us to live in. And that's where people are fearful of that, because when you do, if you are that person that doesn't live life according to the grand plan that somebody set out, people begin to question. They're either thinking that you're doing something wrong, you're going to fail, something's going to be a problem. But we're not asking ourselves what's possible.
Well, and I think that's where, like, honestly, working with a coach can help, right? Because all of those questions and that process of, I'll use the words making friends with your fear, because society would say overcoming your fear, confronting your fear, all these things. No, I think fear is a very intelligent emotion, and I absolutely love fear. I love my fear, and I absolutely appreciate its guidance and teaching. And we have a real strong relationship wherein I listen so it doesn't have to scream in my head and make me miserable, because that can be a little annoying. So I think, and that's why I love my work, right? Is like, so there's the thing in you where you're like, it's almost too painful to sit here and do what I was supposed to do. I know there has to be a better way, and I'm scared to death of it, or I don't feel courageous enough to try it, or I don't even know how to try it, right? Like I wouldn't even know where to start, and it's like, yeah, it's all super interesting is all the word. I was going to say hard or scary, and it doesn't have to be hard or scary. It could be easy, it could be the easiest thing you ever do to actually just say, I'm going to step into living in alignment with my authenticity, truth, purpose, curiosity, all the things. I'm going to ask for help so that when I have things that come up inside of me, I have a support structure with which to process them and to constructively move them through me, so that it's not some upheaval of life. It's just this like, and then I decided to be all of me. And that was awesome. And that's when it all began. And so, um, and maybe it is hard though. I don't know. Like, and maybe it's
I'm all about baby steps. Yeah, because for a lot of people it is hard.
mhm.
It is hard to ask those questions. It is hard, when you say what's possible and you get that idea pop into your head, it's easy to dismiss it.
Mhm.
It's hard to make the change and maybe pursue it. So I'm all about the baby steps. So, for me, when you come across these things like, hey, what if the answer to that scares you, well, what's like that first teeny tiny baby step that you could take just to begin to explore?
Yeah, so I mentioned, I think, a lot about flow states, and that flow has triggers. And one of the triggers is called the 4% challenge to skills ratio. And the idea is that we get into flow when we're between boredom and anxiety. And some very smart people have figured out that that's when we're 4% stretched beyond what we assume are our limitations. I don't know what 4% actually is, but I like the concept of it, right? And so as you say, it's another way of saying baby steps, right? So you could say what would be possible if, and that would feel like maybe that's questioning your whole life. And then you might choose that sentence, what would be possible if I did something that felt really true to me today?
Hmm.
And then you do something, you go for a walk because that feels true. I don't know. You go get on your bike because that feels true. You play with your kids instead of going to a Zoom call because that feels true. I don't know what feels true for you, but like, ask yourself that question 4% harder than is comfortable, and if every day we're playing in 4%, then it's number one, we're more likely to drop into flow because um, and then when we're in flow, our performance and capability goes up. So pattern recognition, ideas, and pattern recognition is huge for when we're asking ourselves these big questions, right? Pattern recognition is having, kind of another way of saying connecting to your inner knowing, right? Like when you're like, oh my God, that's the thing. Like that's the thing, that's just pattern recognition, right? And that comes out of flow. So if you're doing things 4% harder than that is comfortable or boring or whatever, but like you don't push yourself to anxiety, so you don't go straight out the door and quit your job because you're like, I need to be me now, and you're like, okay, that would be anxiety because that wasn't exactly planned. But 4% might be brainstorming what you might do, brainstorming what is interesting, and there's ways to kind of 4% it, until your reality is different.
Yeah, and it's, when you're talking about flow, for me, that's when you're doing something where time almost ceases to exist.
100%.
That's when, you're doing something and then you look up and you're like, oh my God, is it already 4 o'clock?
Yeah. So the characteristics, that's one of the characteristics of when you've been in flow, is timelessness. Selflessness is another one. So not like selflessness in the philanthropic sense, but rather selflessness in that you're not identifying with self. So you're not identifying with your fear or your ego or anything else. You're just in the zone doing the thing. And then richness, it's really fulfilling, and effortlessness. It doesn't feel hard when you're doing it. It just flows. And the interesting thing is when you're in a flow state, it's actually your prefrontal cortex that chills out. That's where all of our critical thinking happens. And that is where our brain processes the sense of self and time. So literally it's timelessness, because the part of your brain that keeps track of time is actually
It's taking a
sleeping.
nap.
And the part of your brain, and then other networks light up, right? So like there's a fixed amount of energy that your brain has. And so when this energy hog, your critical thinker, takes a nap, other networks in your brain get to light up. And that's part of the reason pattern recognition, lateral thinking, some of these other characteristics, increased creativity, That's why flow states are known to generate these other positive things, because other parts of this mass that we carry around to the table. And
Sorry, it froze for a second there. I lost the last part of what you were saying.
I was like, I'm just gonna stay quiet till she comes back. What I was saying is, I don't know where I stopped, but your prefrontal cortex, chills out, and so the other networks in your brain, or the other parts of your brain, can light up and get some of that energy that's otherwise fueling this critical thinker up front. And so that's why flow states are known to generate lateral thinking, pattern recognition, enhanced creativity, and some of these other benefits that come from spending time in flow. So the neurobiology behind it is reasonably well understood and super interesting. And then it begs the question, okay, great. How can I put more of my brain to work to go after creating this life? How could I be in the zone more often so that my performance goes up and I'm capable of doing more? And oh, by the way, you happen to feel better. And then a lot of, it helps in the identity space. It helps in the fulfillment space, in the passion purpose, space. Curiosity is a flow trigger, as is passion and purpose. And so it all starts to weave into, if I could figure out how to get into flow and then design a life around it, well, then that'd be awesome. And it's all possible.
It's definitely all possible, but you have to give yourself the space and the permission to explore it. I think people just don't. They don't take that time. Yeah. And that's where working with someone like you comes into play.
Yeah. And I think it's the choice to, when people are ready, there's resources, who can help. And it's awesome. But
definitely.
I think sometimes people do, maybe more than we give them credit for. And maybe they are asking, and maybe it's just not the answer just isn't coming. Because maybe whatever part of culture they've been presented with hasn't identified that path, So maybe people are asking more. I tend to think, I don't know, I tend to be naively optimistic and think that maybe they are.
Well, certainly we're challenging everybody that's listening to be playfully curious and to start asking those questions and start seeking the adventure in their life. Because once you reach that flow state, you'll keep reaching for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's autotelic. Flow is something we do for the sake of doing it, because it feels so good.
So Kellie, where's the best place for people to connect with you and learn more about how they can find their flow?
The easiest way and the easiest name to remember is ironladycoaching.com. And that'll send you to my website. And all over my website, I've got adventure stories, the mountain bike guide to Alaska, information about, planning adventures around the world. I have a free girl's guide to doing life on your own terms. So you can download that and learn a thing or two about a reframe of how to go about hard things, and kind of a construct that you could adopt in your mind that helps pursue bigger challenges. And then I've got a free coaching session. If somebody's interested in exploring what having help would look like, then I definitely encourage people to sign up and let's do this thing, because I want to live in a world where people are in flow, on fire, and putting their light and purpose out in the world. So if I can help anybody do that, then I'm super stoked.
If you're listening and you're looking at connecting with Kellie, make sure you check out the show notes. I'm going to have all of her links in there. And Kellie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's great to chat.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.
Life is like